Good afternoon and welcome to our Ask Me Anything here with Dr. Will Roper. Thrilled to have you all with us. Thanks so much for joining. I am Colonel Nathan Diller, the Director of AFWERX, joined here with our Head of Acquisition for the United States Air Force, our string theorist and tech enthusiast, Dr. Will Roper. We're going to talk today about AFVentures. Recently, we have combined AFVentures along with AFWERX and Agility Prime under one AFWERX. And Dr. Roper, really thrilled to have you here today. Excited to hear what this new partnership looks like, both across industry, internal to our Air Force, and all the opportunities that this opens. So Dr. Roper, over to you, and thanks so much for joining us here.
Thanks, Vidov. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. But I know that if you're tuning in this afternoon, that this probably isn't your first connection with AFWERX, but if it is, welcome. We are excited to have you join us and just understand how excited the Air Force and Space Force are about getting outside of our fence lines and the five-sided walls that you can see behind me there. These are not very accommodating to people who have never worked in defense. And we realize if we're going to continue being the great services that we have been in the past, that we've got a new model that we've got to chase in this century. And Vidov, I just want to start by congratulating you as one of our newest senior material leaders in the Air Force. Now, for those joining, that's a very acquisition, defense procurement ease speak for our most senior leadership. So Vidov, and tapping you as a senior material leader, as the director of AFWERX, it's sending a clear signal internal to the Air Force and Space Force how important AFWERX is. It's not a side gig. It's not an innovation cell anymore. Congratulations. We are leaving the startup phase after an extremely successful 3 years, and we are now in the scale up and establishment phase. So well done, AFWERX. AFWERX Nation, if you contributed, well done. And Vidov, I couldn't be more confident in your leadership. We're going to keep intros brief because your questions are why we are here. But if you have heard any talk from me or any of our AFWERX team or any of our senior leaders, especially Chief Brown, just laying out his edict for the Air Force that we've got to accelerate change or lose, boy, we have been here for 2.5 years. We realize in Air Force and Space Force acquisition that times have changed. It's not the Cold War anymore. We can't sit inside these five-sided walls until they become a prison, locking us away from the amazing tech ecosystem that our nation and our world provide. And if you've never worked in defense procurement or acquisition, I don't recommend you start anytime soon if you're out in the commercial world, but it is an amazing chance to make change. So it does help to know what we're struggling with so you can help us. The system we've inherited really works on purchasing. It works with us putting money on the table and industry that in the Cold War mainly worked for defense in cutting edge areas of tech, coming to that table and really being dependent on the Defense Department to scale and grow. And of course, that model has completely flipped. We have gone from being the main funder of research and development in this nation to now only a small percentage. 20% of our nation's R&D comes from the military. And that's not because we've gotten any worse at it. Our research lab is just killing it, putting out amazing technology. Even this week, doing $1 million quantum accelerator, and I'm excited to get to talk quantum physics with Neil deGrasse Tyson on Thursday. I mean, what an awesome gig. But technology is not expensive anymore. So many more people can participate in this ecosystem. So the ceiling's been lowered. More people can get in, and technology that would have been military in nature even 10 years ago can now be made by commercial companies. And many companies, the big tech giants in our nation, can aspire to technologies that would have been science fictional 10 or 20 years ago. So times have changed, and we need to change with it. AFWERX and AFVentures inside of it, as one of its three main branches, is all about a new system that can bring technology in, commercial companies in, but not force you to become a defense contractor or even know anything about the military or defense or national security. We want to speak in plain English. We want to have a process that's easy and transparent to understand, which is hopefully what we'll explain today, so that you can bring in interesting ideas. We can help you find the right product market fit within the military, use our military market, which is very different than the commercial one, to help accelerate that technology towards a military mission, but do so in a way that can help you commercialize if that's your ambition. And if you're a company that isn't looking to become commercial in nature, but you want to work in defense, we've got a new way to work with you as well. That's going to be faster and easier than the way we have worked across the so-called valley of death in the past. So that's really what we want to explain today. I'm going to do it in about 2 minutes, and then we're going to jump into your questions. You can pull up those building slides. Let's bring up the first one quickly, AFWERX team. Basically, it starts with our first step, which is just getting you in the door. Now, this is true if you're wanting to be a commercial-facing company or a defense-facing company or somewhere in between. If you have a new idea and you think that it's worthwhile for the military, but you don't know exactly where it fits, or you're really coveting a chance to sit down with a team that can help you polish it, that can give you advice on where to put your last lap level of analysis or business case development, then step one is for you. This gets you in the door, puts you on a very small award. 50K is what we're targeting, 1,000 of these per year. And it's really meant to help you find the right military customer and help you put your best foot forward in getting to speak to them directly. And we want to do 3 solicitations per year. Predictable, you can bank on them, and you can plan how your business is going to grow around them. That moves us to step 2. Let's bring that up. So from the 1,000, we're going to drop down to targeting 300 to 500 medium-sized prototyping awards, around 750K for the base award, but with the ability to scale those up to a few million based on conditions-based or data-based criteria. So we'll get you in the base level, and if you perform well, we'll keep flowing more cash to help you build your prototype successfully. But rather than just getting you in the door, you're now working with your customer, a program office and a user that would ultimately take this, procure it in quantity, and use it on the battlefield. So this is starting to build your product market fit. And we want to do as many of these via live and virtual pitch events as possible. We found this is a valuable way for us to not force you to learn the defense procurement system. And it's really great for us too. Gets people out of government acquisition, gets us face-to-face with innovators, and is really recalibrating our military and our professionals about what technology companies, even small technology companies, can do to make big impact on our mission. And then this graduates to the final phase. So final phase is giving a few companies 20 to 30 per year a chance for a big bet, something that in size and scale would be around a Series A. But this Series A equivalent funding that we call a strategic fund increase, and smaller ones are tactical fund increases, is sufficient in nature to get you to a bill of sale. It's a 4-year-ish contract where you're not just prototyping, you're working on production, you're working on quantities and deployment so that it can be used steady state by a military customer, but in a way that helps you commercialize, if that is your objective. Hey, our missions span almost every field of tech. It's not just what you think about when you think of a military, weapons and airplanes and satellites. We're in energy, we're in medical, we're in data science, we're in quantum, we're in anything you can think about. So we want to understand the direction you're going commercially and try to help work together with you, partner with you, so that our military mission can help slingshot you to commercial success. Okay, let's bring down the process. Back to video if we can, AFWERX team. Thanks. So in a nutshell, that's a very simplified version, but we're going to be going through in eerie detail today. And so ask any questions that are on your mind. And I've given Vidov his copy. So I've signed out New Direction to AFWERX. It's in a much better format than typical government documents. It's written in plain English. And so we'll make this available to everyone so that you can read more about the AFWERX stand up inside of Air Force Acquisition, the 3 branches they'll be running, and particularly about how AFVentures and our commercial marketing, commercial partnerships work so that we can become your innovation partner of choice within the government. And we know that is a privilege we're going to have to earn and continue earning over time. So Vidov, I'm very excited about the questions today, very excited about your leadership, and very excited about our AFWERX team and all the amazing things they've done. You know, they started just by taking some small steps out into the commercial ecosystem, but they have turned into moonshot giant leaps. So I'm excited to see how we grow this enterprise and help us win on the innovation battlefield.
Super, Dr. Roper. Thanks for all of you out there listening. Some of you are on the YouTube chat, others are on Zoom. We're feeding those questions in together. Please keep those questions coming to us. And now we'll start to dig into some of these topics. You mentioned our new Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Brown, just released his Accelerate document. Can you tell us a little bit, how do you see, there's been a lot of innovation discussions, both inside and outside of defense. How do you see this new AFWERX model as being different from those other models that are out there? What is the tool that General Brown now has in his tool set to really move and accelerate as he's suggesting?
It's a great question, Vidov, and I'll tell you, boy, I could not be more simpatico with Chief Brown. He's coming right out of the Pacific and PACAF, so Pacific Air Force as part of the Pacific Command, and coming in with the competitor that is China that we face. He's bringing urgency we need, and I'm really, really glad that he's making this something that's not just an imperative for Air Force Acquisition to do, but for the Air Force in general. And I think we're well poised to meet the intent of his task. We haven't been talking about innovation for innovation's sake and AFWERX and in our acquisition system at large. We've been talking about winning on the innovation battlefield. When we launched Agility Prime, we didn't say we want to go work in flying cars because it's cool and fun and it's innovation, though it's all of those things. And hey, we're the Air Force. We should always be part of cool flying things. But we talked about how there was a lesson to be learned from the DJI Phantom phenomenon. Hobbyist drones emerged in this nation first, and then the supply chain completely went overseas because the government and the military particularly took no strategic action to stabilize part of that market here. While hobbyist drone is one thing, a flying car that could change the way that many businesses and whole tech sectors operate, well, that's a completely different thing. That could have a much bigger economy affecting impact. So we can't stand by idly. We talked about engaging in that program to help win on the innovation battlefield. We've talked about AFVentures as our way to bring the military market as a way to level the playing field that companies are having to walk up when they compete against their Chinese counterparts because they have a nationalized industrial base. They don't have the distinction between military and commercial. They're just a unified, fused military civilian fusion engine. And that, I don't think that has long-term strategic advantages in innovation. I think markets have demonstrated an advantage in staying perpetually innovative and fresh. But it has a short-term advantage that you can get over the hurdles of bureaucracy. You can get the benefit of a military connection if you're a company that can benefit from that, and many can. So AFWERX has been well poised to not just talk about innovation for innovation's sake, but to talk about this is an imperative for us to be able to compete in technology, which is itself a battlefield, and that we have to have a different model in this country in this century because we are competing against a very different model in nations like China. That doesn't mean that we're predestined for China to be our enemy. We're looking for partnership with them, but we are competing with them. That's an absolute, self-evident fact. And that competition right now is adversarial. So we have to hope for better times, but we have to be realist and pragmatist that this competition could go on for a long time. And so where the AFWERX process comes in is it just simply brings the value proposition that we have. The uniqueness of our funding, which is very patient. We can go after deep tech in a way that right now is harder for private investors. We're not owning equity in your companies, so it's easier for you to come first to us and easy for you to bring us into the equation with your private investment partners. And we also have a market, and the military doesn't think of itself that way, but we do purchase things in reasonable quantities. We purchase at different price points than commercial markets do, and we also do our own certifications. So we mentioned flying cars. Yeah, we certify those. You don't have to go through domestic certifications to fly with us. And the same is true for many other types of technology like energy, medical. We have the unique authorities that make the military, that make the Air Force and Space Force almost like a mini country with its own rules. And so as a mini country within this much bigger one, we want to play a synergistic role. I think the AFWERX process has gotten in a good place to play that role, but we can certainly improve. And you and I have talked about that. We've got some warts, some growing pains we're going to fix, but any process that is worth its salt, that is actually doing disruptive things, is going to make mistakes and have growing pains. And if it doesn't, it wasn't pushing the envelope hard enough. We certainly did. We've got room to improve.
So, Dr. Roper, in this establishment of AFWERX, we have, as you know, fantastic partnership now in with AFRL as part of AFRL, amazing and energetic, brilliant leader under General Heather Pringle. What does that do in terms of creating this capability? Why is that partnership so important to this new AFWERX approach?
Yeah, well, I'll say AFRL and Brigadier General Heather Pringle, wow, what an energy she's bringing to our research lab. So if you're out there and you're working in some kind of new amazing field of science or technology, look up our research lab and find a way of getting it to us and use AFWERX as a conduit to get to them. If it's not right for the AFWERX model, we'll get you to the right customer within the Air Force or even the military as a whole. A win for the military, no matter what branch, no matter what service, is a win for AFWERX and a win for the Air Force writ large, Air Force and Space Force writ large. So come see us. She is bringing amazing energy to the research lab, and I think it's very similar to the vision I have for Air Force acquisition, which includes science and technology and research and development. And that's that we've got to turn ourselves inside out. We cannot sit beside, in our conference rooms, behind our high fence lines and just hope that the world's leading innovators will come see us. And so Heather's doing a great job of trying to make the lab a catalyst, an ecosystem that can work with defense unique tech, but also applied tech and many areas of technology that are going to change the battlefield, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, just to name one that's always on people's minds. But there are many others like quantum that are being driven by gale force winds that are private investment backing them, that are going to be bigger than the military. Well, she's changing the model so that we can work with those entities at their speeds. And then the research's lab value proposition is what we've just discussed for the military as a whole, that we have patient dollars. We can stick with things in deep tech. We have amazing researchers with deep skill sets. But rather than just working behind our walls, getting outside of them has a huge value as well for collaboration. And one great example is the AI accelerator at MIT. So up at the CSAIL Institute, which did that amazing image of the black hole, which was as a string theorist who's recovering now in defense. What an amazing accomplishment. Well, we have a $15 million a year institute there that's all about bringing cutting edge AI to solve military problems. That's a great example of taking our research enterprise and creating a broader ecosystem that brings principal investigators from academia in. And where we see overlapping interest or problems that are worth solving together, we do. just repeat that everywhere, and that feels like competing at scale. And Heather's doing a great job of bringing the energy to do that.
So just a week ago here with Preston Dunlop talking through ABMS, and there's kind of a question, significant effort for the Air Force with ABMS. Traditionally, our defense primes have been engaged in that. What does that look like to get some of these smaller firms engaged in something that is at the scale of ABMS?
Yeah, it's going to be one of the Herculean challenges, and I think I would take most of the labors of Hercules over trying to build the Internet of Things for the military. For some reason, it's just hard for the military's procurement system to do things in an internet style, and I'll give a couple of reasons why. But the whole theory of the case, we could do a whole Ask Me Anything on it, and we effectively did that. The Advanced Battle Management System, which I don't like that name, so don't worry about that. But it's like Castle Anthrax and Monty Python. It's not a very good name, but it is the one that the castle inherited, and we inherited that in the program. Just think of it as the Internet of Things .mil. If you came in the military today, you would leave a world where you are massively connected to everything at home, and then come sit in a military where you're connected to almost nothing. Our airplanes and bombers and ships and ground vehicles are amazing systems, but they were not engineered in a connected mindset. So, and there's no reason they can't be, they just weren't. And because our procurement system really deals with system performance, we don't create a mandate for things that are more architecturally inspired, like interconnectivity, adaptability. And ABMS is trying to create a new model where that is what we incentivize industry to do. Well, it'll probably surprise you that coming into this job, we didn't even have a tech stack that was worth anything in the Air Force and Space Force. So we have had to do heroes work to put in cloud and platform and data as a service. And now we're starting to build analytics as a service and AI as a service. All of these have a one moniker at the end of them. So Cloud One, Platform One, Data One, Smart One. Yeah, it just makes it easier to remember. But if you're out wondering what all these ones are, they're just a tech stack that you would find out in the internet. But it's a military tech stack. It meets the requirements that we have. And I think that is going to allow so many companies to engage on ABMS that may not be able to build a fighter or a bomber, but that might bring amazing analytics, or software-defined radios or networks that can plug in to the equivalent of the internet, but one that operates at multiple levels of classification across a joint force, including with the intelligence agency, where their digital tech, their algorithmic advantage might be the delineator on the battlefield. And increasingly, that is going to be the case. So building that tech stack as fast as we can, getting this family of one systems where it can connect to nearly everything in the joint force doesn't mean we're going to redo what services are already doing, just means we're going to connect with them, share data with them, so that we're a machine-to-machine data exchanging service. And then that opens the door for so many fields of technology that are currently locked away from us because we haven't built the infrastructure to enable them. So at this next on-ramp, which is happening this week, we're going to be showing the next evolution of that tech stack, which is going to have AI as a service, bringing in Project Maven, one of my old projects from back in the day, a great partnership with USDI, bringing in AI from our research enterprise across the department. It finally has a home to live in where its effects can go across many systems that you know and love, like Raptors and Aegis ships and you name it. So I think the star is on the rise for ABMS. And if you haven't had a chance to connect with it out in industry, 70 companies participating this week and more opportunities every 4 months.
So knowing ABMS, obviously, some of the things that ABMS will be passing from a data perspective will be classified. As we look in this new commercial space, one of the questions that came across, what does it look like to get some of these small businesses that have never really been engaged in DoD work, in cases maybe classified work? What does that transition look like if they are interested in getting into some of our more classified programs?
Yeah, it's a problem that we have, and I've got some ideas about how we can solve it. But right now, we can't even start your clearance process. We can't start getting your facilities accredited for classified work until you're on contract with us. And I think that's a model that we're going to need to change. It might be okay when you're only working with a handful of companies. It doesn't make sense. We need to encourage companies to take on what is a true national service, which is being able to dedicate part of your staff, your facilities for classified work to help the military. And if you're one of those companies, one of those founders, then just let me tell you, I appreciate your willingness to serve this great country we live in and the military that supports it. So things we can do in the interim. One, most things we can start at an unclassed level. If you're working in an idea, a base technology, we try not to classify ideas. It's not a very good place for the military to be because you classify yourself out of ideas if you do that. So we can start working with you with whatever idea you have. We can even do applications of it. And then that gets you on contract where we can start working clearances and facility accreditations. The good news is that stepping from the unclassified level up to the secret level isn't a really tough step to take. Clearances, we can work really quickly. We use a lot of automated tools to help us vet people. And the facilities work isn't that difficult to do. It's when you go beyond secret up into top secret and black programs that the level goes up. And we can work towards those. So that's where we're going to be in the near term. What I hope to do moving into the next fiscal year is to partner with some of our larger companies, some of our defense primes, and using no-cost contracts, be able to sponsor clearances ahead of having you on contract. If you're interested in working with us in the classified world, you have ideas, but maybe they're not ready today, but you want to understand if they're worth chasing, then I think we can work ahead of having you on contract to explore them and just build up a broader pool of companies that are willing to do this work with us. One of the very cool things that we were able to do in the Air and Space Force is to maintain our military readiness without blemish during COVID-19. Amazing men and women doing things completely outside the box, many of them remotely during this pandemic. And one of the things that I think has not been broadly publicized about the pandemic, because there are other things to focus on, is that we kept our programs from coming off the rails. We were ready to fight on any given day. All of our readiness mechanisms, the depots, our tests, our flight lines were ready to go. Industry was ready to go. So the silver lining for these companies is if you were working in defense, you were critical infrastructure. And it was an imperative, no matter what state you were working in, that you continue to work through this crisis because you are supporting the critical infrastructure that is our military. Well, maybe that is a value proposition in a more uncertain world, that if you're working in defense and the uncertain happens, defense work has to continue. The nation demands it. A military that can't fight today is not a true military. And so for companies that were working in defense, they got a stabilizing effect through the pandemic. They got the entire acquisition engine energized to help keep them solvent, to help keep cash flow positive so that they could support military readiness. And maybe that's a value proposition for companies in future to have part of their company working in defense.
Super. On those companies that are out there, one of the questions that came through is these new companies show up, maybe hearing this the first time. What's the first step for them? Or where do they get in touch with us? You talk through kind of the phase one. Is that the only path, especially as they start to move and want to understand our problem sets a little bit better? What does that interaction look like? So they get a better understanding. Is this right for me from a small business perspective?
Great question. That's why I think for most companies coming in through the AFVentures phase one, which uses a fund called Small Business Innovative Research, but all you need to do is go to the AFWERX website and we'll be able to walk you through how to get those ideas to us. But to have 3 cycles per year, which we'll be posting on the AFWERX website. So just go to afwerx.af.mil and you'll be able to pick up our timeline of events. But you as a company, as a founder or an investor, you need to know precisely when on the calendar we're going to be open for new ideas. And then that really starts the process of finding your ideas fit to the right military customer. So we get you on a small contract that connects you with the AFWERX team. Think of their job as almost running an accelerator inside the government. they're going to be sitting down. They can't really work with companies individually because, we've got 1,000 coming in every year. We brought in over 1,000 new companies, new to the government over the last 18 months alone, which is an amazing accomplishment. But we can certainly work with companies in a cohort fashion, provide good mentoring, educational opportunities to help you understand how your idea may fit to a military mission, give you feedback on what you need to do to be successful for one of those medium prototyping bets, and get you ready to pitch to that customer. So for our phase one warriors in AFVentures inside of AFWERX, we're going to judge them by how well their cohorts do, just like an accelerator would. So I think for most companies, it's going to be a great place to be. And by the way, big selling point. If you get put on one of our phase one contracts, you can go anywhere in the government and sell your idea, your product, without having to be recompeted. So we call this a hunting license within the government. And if you get in through our front door, you can go anywhere in the US government, even outside of defense. So that's an amazing reason alone to come to our front door of the Air Force and Space Force and spend a little time with our AFWERX team to see if your idea is a right fit for our mission.
So you mentioned over 1,000 companies in just the last 18 months. It's starting to be a pretty notable sample size. What are the lessons learned? What recommendations do you have both for the companies that are out there and for those cohorts of airmen that are out there bringing these companies in?
Yeah, no, I'll just say the team has done a remarkable job, and it's the scale at which AFVentures is working that's amazing. So 1,000 companies new to the government, almost 2,300 contracts on the whole since AFWERX has stood up. That's an amazing accomplishment. But what I'm really excited about is how many companies are new to the government. And I think the thing that is a mark of success is that companies that are working with private investors, with venture capitalists, we have seen those private investment partners increase their funding as a consequence of our award. So that tells us something very interesting. It says that our vetting, our analysis, and our award is a clearinghouse for these private investors as to whether the company is trending towards a good fit within the military. And that is being viewed then as a delineator in whether that company will successfully commercialize. So that's it in a nutshell. That's what's huge about AFVentures, is not that we're working quickly and doing contracts in 15 minutes and we're doing accelerators and we have all the right buzzwords. What actually speaks is the money being put, into companies where our mouth is, saying that they have a viable chance to contribute to defense. So since we began AFVentures, 3.58 private dollars invested for every government dollar we've put in, which is a really good ratio for something that's this young. So we've more than quadrupled our money. So what that tells me is that we've got a lot right, though I think we can certainly improve, but we've got to keep our vetting standards high. We've got to keep our process transparent and our vetting standards high, because right now our awards are the equivalent of the Good Housekeeping seal of approval for our missions. And if we ever lower that standard, I think we'll see that matching ratio drop as well. So if you take one thing away from this talk, what is different about AFVentures, different than anything else that we've seen in the government, is that the investment dollars that Colonel Diller runs for me and for the whole Air Force and Space Force are coupled to program dollars. We match AFVentures with program, and then we match that with private, and all of that adds up to a delineated product market fit, which is changing the way private investors engage. That's what's different, is it connects investment to the market that we represent. That is why I think we've moved as quickly as we have. We just can't lower what has made that successful.
As you look at that, in the Agility Prime example, we had some of the companies coming back and saying they were able, even in the middle of COVID, to close some of their funding rounds. One of the questions that's been posed, without showing cards of what the future primes, what's the role of AFVentures and what are the types of attributes of some of the potential future primes? How does AFVentures kind of play that role in identifying those new tech areas?
Sure. So just to set everyone, on a level basis, right now, AFWERX has 3 branches inside of it. And since we've done the this 2.0 launch. So AFVentures we're talking about here, that is the investment arm of the Air and Space Force. So if you're out there working in small business innovative research, our technology transfer account, that's $800 million per year, and couldn't be more important work. So if you want to know where my passion is and what I think speaks to the future of our service, it's that $800 million a year and how well we invest it. So that's one branch. We have a second branch called Spark. And if you have engaged in a Spark tank, a collider, a fusion event, all about getting operators from the edge, users together with people who make things, who build things, who can solve problems. That work could not be more important because our whole business is solving problems for users at the edge. And that team has done an amazing job from day one. And then there's our Prime branch, which is running Agility Prime, which is the first program in the Defense Department that is trying to shift a market to accelerate a commercial market for strategic advantage, not just for the military, but for the nation, in this case, flying cars. So Vidoff, you know, flying cars was the place you and I met, not actually in one, but we both wanted to make it real. And that started our collaboration. And then, boy, that was a great day for me. But that happened through happenstance. And so what I expect will happen in future is that as we put out these tri-yearly solicitations for new ideas, and that's the base of the pyramid that we start building up into the medium bets, and then the strategic fund increases that are the top of the pyramid. I expect that as we put those calls out, we do the awards, we will start seeing a lot of ideas cluster around new markets. So right now we're looking at a lot of ideas, say, in quiet supersonic passenger travel. Now, is that a potential new prime program? Maybe we need to do that thinking, that consideration. But we won't just be looking at the technology or the companies per se in prime. We're going to be looking at the market and how it would evolve if the government does or doesn't, the Air Force does or doesn't get involved in a strategic and beneficial way. And if we think that we can and that the benefit is there, then it would transition into one of those prime initiative, prime programs like Agility Prime, where our goal is not simply to get technology transition to the warfighter, though we're always trying to do that. It's trying to do something synergistic with the market itself. So if you have ideas for a whole market shifting initiative, go to the AFWERX website as well, or you're always welcome to send me an email, and let's talk about how we partner together to truly win on that innovation battlefield that is commercial tech.
So speaking of technologies, as you know, you mentioned General Pringle, one of her key priorities there under AFRL is making sure that it is one AFRL for two services and that focus on space. What does that look like for an AFWERX perspective, from an AFRL perspective in this ventures? What do you see as ventures looking like in the space domain?
Well, I mean, our space teams have been the heart and soul of the ventures process since day one. So, you know, AFVentures doesn't mean anything. We went that as kind of a spoof off of adventure. You know, it's an AFVenture. But you know, space. If we could make it space ventures, you know, I mean, it's not a word, but boy, you know what we mean by it. Space has been a huge part of it. In fact, most of the big awards that we've done, space has been over 40% of them, so punching well above their weight. And out at the Space and Missile Center, there are some amazing majors and lieutenant colonels and captains who have been the heart and soul of this AFVentures initiative. So what's really important in the research lab is it's not an Air Force research lab. That's its name from historical ties, but it has got to serve the two services. And AFWERX is now being facilitated as part of the research lab, and it has to rise to that same bar. And so one of the tasks that we're going to have to ensure we do, Vidoff, is make sure that we are smartly investing across the needs of both of our two services. The cool thing about space, if you're out there, if you are a space acquirer, a space company, a space warfighter, boy, it is going to be fun over the next foreseeable future because there's so much commercial innovation in space. But I see a lot of it as deep tech. Deep tech right now is tough for private investors. You know, it is tough to, you know, to get a business case to clear in space because of that difficult cost that is launch. That we're certainly working on that in Space Force, but launch really drives a pretty big first step. And so this is an area that the government can play a hugely strategic role. And so we've got to be able to do both, because the skill set that AFVentures represents, it's an investment skill set. And we're not going to have thousands of people to throw at this. So where we have people who know how to do this business, we've got to make sure that they're switch hitters.
With the space, for many years, relatively few number of companies that were playing in that realm. One of the questions that came across is there any concern that as we begin to invest in these companies, does it continue to be consolidated and they get gobbled up by larger companies eventually? What do you see in terms of what consolidation looks like among those many partners that are out there?
It's a risk. I mean, I do own that. That is typically what has happened to companies in the Small Business Innovative Research Fund as a whole. Lots of great people working in this initiative, but it wasn't connected to the big acquisition system, the market that we represent, and that created a valley of death. And so unfortunately, the option that was only left to many companies hitting the end of the SBIR pipeline was to be acquired by a prime, and then ultimately that technology would be charged back to us, but probably with a little higher rate than we would have gotten from a small business. So we are endeavoring to fix that. That's why we've got a separate matching paradigm for defense unique companies. So I mentioned private investment matching. And so, for instance, for a StratFi award for the third phase, you've got to have, for every SBIR dollar that you request, you've got to have a matching program dollar and at least 2 matching private investment dollars. Or if you're not working with private investors and you don't want to, then for every dollar of SBIR you request, you have to have 2 matching dollars in program investment. So there are 2 paths that you can follow. And we think it's fair, because if you're going to be commercial, we want you to show us that you're actually viable, that you can move the commercial enterprise because of the validity of your path to commercialization. That's the good housekeeping seal for us. And if you don't want to go that path, if you can't convince a program office and their user to co-invest with SBIR, then your impact on the future battlefield must not be big enough, or your risk is too high. So this matching dollar paradigm is exceptionally important. And I think Vidoff, that if we pull that bar down and we don't do the matching, I think we'll lose the entire magic that is this. It's really bringing the market fit, the user fit together. Now back to whether you get acquired. Well, if you've got a path to go to a bill of sale, my hope is that if you don't want to enter into one of those acquisition agreements with a larger company, that you don't feel as compelled, because there's a path to steady cash flow with us. And what I hope we'll do in future, beyond the authority we have now, is explore greater authorities, things like the In-Q-Tel model. And, we've had some interesting discussions on that even today, about being able to go beyond our current authority, potentially own equity, be able to do emergency cash flow, emergency cash, emergency contracting, so that we can avoid procurements that maybe aren't in a company's best interest, or maybe they're adversarial in nature. Maybe it's a nation that's coming in to buy a company to deny us access to that tech, or to make it accessible to their military. So the battlefield is broad and deep, and we are doing really well, but we're at the surface layer, and I think there's a deeper layer of competition that we can achieve, but we need a deeper level of authority to achieve it.
A following question from the audience, talking about kind of big firm, small firm. What's the role of our defense primes or large firms that are not SBIR qualified in the AFWERX model? How do you see them playing?
Sure. No, it's a great question. I have talked with all of our defense primes about AFVentures and AFWERX in general, because I mentioned we're a market, they are too. So we're very aware that we don't build airplanes and satellites in the government. We don't build hardly anything, and that's not a knock against us. It just speaks to how our model works, that we rely on private enterprise to provide our warfighting's leading and cutting edge. But our defense primes and major defense suppliers spend a lot of internal money getting ready to propose to us. There are small business set-asides in every major programs that historically we let the primes tell us how they're going to spend them. And there are two ways I expect them to change. One, for their internal investments to open themselves up so that they're an ecosystem that can help catalyze companies that are working in dual-use technology. And they have to have a different model than the past, because if you're hoping to commercialize, you're not going to enter into an intellectual property agreement that's going to pull you off that path unless the deal is really good, which that's all in your decision space. But I know a lot of companies don't want to enter that in. They've got a big dream. They've got funding from private investors. They don't want to get off that path. So primes need a different model to work with companies that are dual use. And I've talked with them about mirroring the way we do it, which is viewing access and the ability to leverage that technology as a competitive delineator, not the ownership of that IP. And the second thing that we can do is have the government take back ownership and be collaborative with the primes on how we spend our small business set-asides. I mean, think about a program that's as massive as our ground-based strategic deterrent. So a likely $60 billion procurement, is a huge, and you might think a replacement for our intercontinental ballistic missiles, where can small businesses play a role in that? And the answer is everywhere. It is going to be one of the largest military movements in history, replacing an ICBM a week for 9 years. My goodness, this is going to be massive. And so it's a logistics challenge. It's a maintenance challenge. It's a facilities challenge. We care about nearly everything under the sun. And this is an area small businesses can help really contribute and bring in agility that large organizations lose as they grow. So it's a long answer to, there are places everywhere that our primes can be part of the ecosystem that our defense industrial base complex represents. We've taken a step in the Air and Space Force, and I invite our primes to take a step as well. In fact, if you're out there watching and your CEO or your executive VPs want to send me an email and say we're in, spot available on my calendar as soon as we can arrange it to talk about how we work together to build this ecosystem.
So you mentioned GBSD, arguably one of the most innovative teams out there from a program management side. We think about nukes and we think of long lethargic programs. Can you give a little more detail specifically on something like GBSD, the interaction as a bit of a model for how other PEOs engage in these large programs? So it's not small programs, but there's going to be this engagement in some of these larger programs.
Yeah, I'll hit it briefly because I do want to make sure we hit the AFVentures questions. But GBSD is fully digital. It's full digital threading. So everything they do is in a digital world, kind of like the Matrix. They're living in their digital world, and then what they dream up there, what they design there, what they de-risk there, wakes up in the real world and is ready to go. I mean, they've explored over 6 billion different designs before going with the one they deemed best. It's an amazing tool. And that digital environment that they go into when they plug themselves into their digital matrix, and yes, their powers for design and assembly and engineering in that digital world are just as formidable as Neo's in the movies. If you haven't seen The Matrix, go see it. It's a great place to get inspired about what digital technology can do. It opens up an amazing potential for small businesses. That tech stack with its digital engineering tools I mentioned for ABMS, like Cloud One and Platform One for war fighting at the edge. Yep, GBSD leverages those tools for their development, their software development, and their digital engineering in future. So it's an amazing accomplishment by an amazing team, and just another way we can open ourselves up to the broader ecosystem.
So as we move to the other end of the spectrum there with ventures, can you talk a little bit, what is the role of ventures in engaging with universities?
Absolutely critical. So I didn't know this before joining this job, but we have a whole account that is meant to help people in universities transition technology out into companies that want to help commercialize it. So it's the STTR account. And I think we can do so much with this. So one, working with our research lab with Heather Pringle to make sure we understand where technology in a university is ripe for commercialization, for capitalization, and then being able to use the process that we have to find very innovative companies, to find innovative principal investigators or graduate researchers or even undergraduates who want to spin out something they worked on as a research project. I want them to think of the Air Force as step one to building their business, because you don't give up anything by accepting our funding. It's just amazing. You get on a fixed price contract, no equity lost, and we're going to help you take that technology to the next level. So that, roughly between $150 to $200 million a year transition account, we're targeting for quantum research this year, but we can go anywhere with it. So amazing potential for people who want to spin out companies from universities to do it with some Air Force funding and Space Force funding backing.
So we talk about on the STTR program, Small Business Technology Transfer Program, now opportunities for them to move into a small business program. You talk another of the questions a little bit more about what is this phase 3? What is the real value of this phase 3 program, and how do you get there?
You mean phase 3?
Phase 3 of the SBIR program.
So the StratFi step?
StratFi and then beyond.
Yeah, so phase 3 doesn't really exist. And this is something that I find most people don't know. It's like a there be dragons part of the math, or they just put it there when you don't understand the process. There is no phase 3 funding that's allocated by Congress. That is where you have to have a program office working with you. And that is why this valley of death, which actually isn't a valley, it's a trench that the government intentionally left there by not creating a process that bridges over the different funding accounts. So if you were working in SBIR historically, you came in, you did a phase 1, you did a phase 2, and the exceptionally lucky might be on a phase 3 contract funded by a program team or prototyping dollars. But the process didn't bring in those program teams intentionally. And so most companies got left high and dry, which is why it's not been a process that has launched a lot of unicorns. I mean, we've only had a few in defense. And if you look at how many have existed in areas of technology that overlap with our mission, that tells me something is fundamentally wrong about our process. So we have to do better with this feed off. I think that there's a lot that we can do to improve on this for sure. And I hope that I hope that as we compare how the process works today, where we get you up right now to a tactical fund increase, where we're increasing the matching dollars from a program office. So not as big as a strategic fund increase, but something that will get you up in the many millions, though maybe not the 20-30 that we can do with a StratFi. That we will find more mechanisms to bring those program dollars in, because if in AFVentures, we're connecting your company with a program team, then you have a much better chance of moving beyond a StratFi or a TactFi to either just a normal bill of sale, which is just a contract with a program, or maybe that phase 3 because you're working with the entities that will fund them. And so if you're a company in the past that was left high and dry, it's the government's fault. We could have built a better process. We could have built a better bridge to get you to the big market that is our service. And AFVentures is something we are passionate about to make sure that bridge is there in the future.
Can you talk a little bit from the engagement with investors? What do they see from an investor perspective? What types of investors are you finding are interested in doing this co-investment model under AFVentures? What do they see as the benefit? What do they see as the risks of partnering with us?
The response has been great, and primarily we've been working with venture capitalists. So firms that you know, and I lawyers don't like when I give shout outs to specific firms, but I'll just say all of the major firms that you know have just been great partners and have just done a great job of embracing us, helping us, mentoring us, and then finally co-investing with us. And that makes sense because our SBIR account that we're using for AFVentures really fits well with the VC world. And we're growing a lot of interesting companies and helping in areas of deep tech. And that has generated a lot of enthusiasm, has, I think, stimulated more investment than would have existed naturally in deep tech. And I think that's an area we can actually be a valuable member of the community and ecosystem. Now, we're not to private equity yet, and I'm starting to talk with those firms because that's a different level of engagement. That's a different level of maturity. I think that we'll eventually go there, but I think that's going to follow more in Prime's role as we start growing companies into bigger market entrants, bringing them into the military market, growing them, but stabilizing their growth and keeping it domestic because of that steady cash flow from the military. I think it will naturally generate an interface with private equity firms when we're at a much bigger size. But we have to earn our way to that. So I talk with them, Vidoff. They're very interested. I think there are a couple of areas of partnership, especially in transitioning technology from our research lab, not just to defense companies, but transitioning it to commercial companies to commercialize is an area we can work with private equity today. But I think we've got to grow a little more until that is a routine area of business.
So getting a stack of questions on the StratFi concept. Can you talk us just a little bit on timeline? If I'm a company first hearing about this today, a little bit on timeline, a little bit on what to expect, the mechanics, easy parts, hard parts of those mechanics. And then what does that launch you into?
Okay, so the most important thing, if you're interested in getting one of the StratFis, the most important thing for you to understand and be laser focused on are those phase 2 medium bets. So you got in through the door, you got your hunting license, and now you're going to do a live or virtual pitch event, and occasionally we'll do it via paper, but we really do want to talk to the companies. And now you've got a phase 2 award with a program team and a user. So congratulations if you've made that. That's a huge, huge step. That gets you in the running for one of these tactical fund increase or strategic fund increase, and you could end up being both. So let me hit the tactical fund increase first. So $750,000 base award and conditions-based award to go higher than that. But to go higher, you've got to have this matching fund paradigm, which is lower for tactical fund increase. So typically 1-to-1 within the government. We'll even entertain lower than that, and at least 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 with private investors if you're on that track. We could do multiple tactical fund increases if you're really making progress, and those just stay in that phase 2 cycle. And those will be things that you'll work directly with that program team and that customer. But once a year, and we'll put the rules out at the end of every summer to get ready for the StratFis, will be the rules for StratFis. And unfortunately, we don't control those rules in the Air Force or even in the Pentagon, because to do the StratFis, and even in some cases the TACFIs, we need waivers from the Small Business Administration, and we need your help to help them understand why the StratFis are so important. They're the top of the pyramid. We're talking 20 or 30 of these a year. So here's how the process worked the first year. We asked for waivers, and we really want to give a shout out to SBA for being willing to go there. They were a daring group of innovators, especially a guy named John Williams. So John, I just want to give you a public shout out for being willing to dream the dream with us, because we have to have a waiver to do them. So it allows a company to request up to $15 million in SBIR funding. But there's a catch. So don't clip the video there. There's a catch. But it requires a waiver. And very few companies asked for that amount. But we allow that. But in order to ask for SBIR funding for a StratFi, one of these phase 2 companies also has to bring in an equal amount of public matching funds. It could be from that program office, somewhere else in the government, but you have to match the SBIR dollar for dollar. So the more SBIR you ask for, the more matching funds that you have to bring inside the government. So we're willing to do it, but the level of fit with the customer and user has to be equivalent. And then if you're going commercial, you also have to bring 2 times the amount of matching private funds. So that's a lot of money by the time you add it up. It could be as much as $60 million on a 4-year contract. But some of the StratFis were as low as $3 or $4 million, so $5 million total. It all depends on what technology it is. Here's why it's important, is that for a lot of big ideas, without the potential to get to that top of the pyramid, we simply don't have a process that can help you fully realize and productize your idea and sell it to us in quantities that matter. Whereas our commercial counterparts have it. You're going to hit a Series A after a seed round and then do Series A, B, maybe even C. You've got the chance to go as big as private investors see potential in your idea. And I don't think we have to have the same levels that match Series A, B, and C's, but we do have to have a process that can get you to a bill of sale. StratFi is the way that we do that with big ideas that require some level of productionization. And so it's very important. And what I have seen since we put it in place is more companies are interested in coming in the base of the pyramid to have a chance to compete to get to the top. We brought in more money last year in SBIR and AFVentures than any year in history once we implemented the SBIR. We awarded more contracts in history. So the thing that you can help us with, help us get the word out. We did more small business on the whole with more small businesses, thanks to having this chance to take some big bets. The numbers speak for themselves. In fact, if you go back to history, 75% of SBIR in history, if you go back to legacy times, were spent in about 645 companies. So we just missed this chance for a large number of companies to be able to come in and compete for the top and maybe never come back into AFVentures again. That may be enough to help them launch their business. So, I just think that, we've got to be able to diversify. We've got to be able to have a model that fits any type of company. And since we put this in place, man, we are booming in terms of the number of companies we're working with. And again, I say our legacy process was flawed. It did not allow companies to get to that bill of sale. It didn't allow them to productize a big idea. And so companies that came in were often left, either having to repeat, go back, into the beginning of the cycle again, hoping for better results, or to enter into one of those acquisition discussions with a larger company.
To shift the conversation just slightly from an AFVentures perspective, obviously we live in a global economy, global tech. One of our priorities in the National Defense Strategy is partners. Can you tell us, is there a role for international in AFVentures right now?
It's tough. So we're doing our best, but the SBIR account is fenced statutorily for U.S. companies. And so statutorily means we can't change that. That's a law, and we can't. We're very good at aggressive interpretation and bending, not breaking, but it is a firm law. So we are pulling funding from outside of SBIR to do our first international pitch event in partnership with the UK in November, completely focused on space. So an international space pitch day, which we're really excited about doing. But we don't have an account that's dedicated for that. And I think that's the next ask for Congress, is some additional flexibility and authorities, and maybe a small account that we can show good stewardship with, so that we can help compete on the innovation battlefield globally. Because if we don't have a mechanism for a company to work with the US and its military, then maybe a country like China is there before us. So we are all for growing the greatest tech ecosystem here in the U.S. That's a mission we take seriously. But we also have to be cognizant it's a global tech ecosystem. We have to compete everywhere. And so I do think we need an account for that global fight. And I think we can mirror everything we do right now in AFVentures. I think everything goes global. We just need the authority from Congress to go do it.
You mentioned the International Pitch Day. Talk a little bit about what role does Pitch Day play kind of in this whole AFVentures process? Where does it fit? Why do we do these pitch days?
It's a good question. You know, that the original Pitch Day was a challenge for me to a group of dreamers within AFWERX, a group of amazing plank owners in the SBIR Center of Excellence at the Air Force Research Lab, and some amazing contracting ninjas from across the Air Force, just to go try to put on an event that feels like a Shark Tank, where we award contracts and we pay those awards in as quick as possible. And the fastest one we've done on record is about 3 minutes from the time the pitch was over to the time we had actually paid that company. So not just had them on contract, but had money in their accounts. So for some companies, money and accounts actually matters. If you're a founder, you probably had a time where making those paychecks, or whether you paid, whether you got a paycheck because you're paying your employees, that those were tough choices. So for some businesses, and I've talked personally with several founders, that the ability to get them cash that month was whether or not they had to go find another job. And you know, as someone that has has owned a small business and worked it in partnership with my wife, I understand what that feels like. So for very small companies, that speed matters. But broader, why does it matter? A lot of reasons. Our procurement system and stuff we have to include in requests for information by law is obscure and sometimes obtuse. And so by getting companies in and talking with them directly, we separate wheat from chaff in a way a paper-driven process never could. Thing two, we're recalibrating ourselves. You have to think, a lot of stodgy defense procurement thinks small business equals small impact. And I don't like the term small business at all. Small doesn't mean anything. It's all about the impact you can have. But that's what a lot of people think. And by bringing in the market and its procurers and acquirers, its users and its technologists, we're recalibrating them about what you can do. And so that's another thing that's hugely valuable, is just getting that direct connection. And the other thing we found is that it brings the users in a way that is helpful long term. Users rarely connect with the acquisition system, and this is a powerful way to give them a touch point that matters, so that we're seeding the future battlefield with ideas that have the user's fingerprints on them. They're not just lab coats and suits and sports coats that are determining the way warfare is going to evolve and the technology that's going to enable it. But people understand that the best ideas have to get dirt on them out in the field.
Can you talk a little bit? So you talked about the pitch days. Tell us a little bit more about the fast track, the direct to phase twos, and the role that those play.
Yep. So you may be thinking, hey, wait a second, Will. I know my idea. I've worked with the Air Force or another service before. This 50K front porch, front door entry is not something I need. I want to go ahead and really start talking to my user. Well, great. We've got a fast track to those medium bets. And the way that we do our solicitations are open topics, open calls. And sometimes we'll do commercial solutions offerings. Don't worry about the specifics or the technical details. Just know this means we got an open door to any idea. We'll give you some specifics about what we might be interested in, but you can propose anything. So if we're talking about, energy efficiency and flying cars, and you've got a flying saucer, yeah, you can bring that. Please do bring that. Warp drive's always welcome. But a lot of those solicitations, and in fact, we plan to make this standard for most of our phase 1 and our phase 2 calls, is they will allow companies to go direct to phase 2, which means you can propose that you want to enter into one of those medium bets, maybe put yourself in the running for a TACFI or a StratFi. And all that means is you've got to be able to get your idea fully baked for a military mission in a way that doing that phase 1 accelerator type work would normally provide that information. So if you can do it, you're ready. The door is open. You can skip step 1 and jump directly to step 2.
So along those lines, we've talked kind of phase 1, the phase 2, or the direct phase 2, StratFi, phase 3s, eventually in some cases, all to getting fielded capability. Can you talk about some of the challenges along the way, any particular success stories that you might want to discuss?
Sure. Will there be challenges? Yes. Have there been challenges? Yes. This is the government. If I could just mind meld with you and help you understand how much of the 8.5 pounds of regulation and statutes we are hacking with this AFVentures process, I'll tell you, friends, this is a field operating table type operation. This is not the way the procurement system was envisioned decades ago, but it's what our warfighters need today. Bottom line is we are often working exceptions to rules. We need waivers, we mentioned before, from agencies that don't work for us, and we have to have partnerships. And bottom line, there will always be delays and hiccups until we get radical reform of this process by Congress. And I hope the progress we've made lets us start that discussion in earnest with the data and the results to back it up. So yes, there will be hiccups. And if you have gone through that, if you have had one of those cautionary tales we've learned from me to you, personal apology that you have had to be one of the learning cases for us. And we strive to do better. And I know our learning cases, I believe all of them, by name and by example, because I don't want to relearn them again. But we've had amazing successes, far more amazing successes than cautionary tales and learning examples. In our space enterprise, we've had companies be put on contract and deliver capability being used by operators less than a month later. I mean, can you imagine if you have never worked with the military and all of a sudden you're with a bunch of space operators and your capability is making a difference in day-to-day operations? We've had companies have that experience, which is just awesome and cool. We've had companies during COVID-19 make the difference as whether critical supplies made it to the US, that have made a difference as to whether personal protective gear have been able to be made. The list goes on and on. We have this amazing enterprise, this amazing ecosystem. And so the inspiration that comes from it should make me and anyone in my job and anyone working in this building dedicate a significant portion of their time to tech startups, small businesses per se, because it all adds up to big results. And I'll tell you, I mean, we've got companies that are building hypersonic systems that are technically small businesses building hypersonic vehicles. What does small business mean anymore? Other than you've managed to find a very efficient business model that does not look like the government. So more power to you. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And we need to break down the barrier, and senior leaders need to spend more of their time caring about this kind of work. And it's why I spend so much of my time. It's not just inspiring, which it is, but it's also strategically important for planting seeds that are going to keep our industrial base healthy and growing in years to come.
It's been amazing to see, even through the adversity of COVID, a lot of these companies moving forward. Can you talk from an AFVentures perspective? You know, they brought in a lot of companies, software companies, as we talk about challenges to transition, our ability to operate. Obviously, we're very concerned about cybersecurity. We have processes to do that. Can you talk about options that we might be able to make that a little bit more possible for those companies to move quickly through that ATO?
Yeah, so one, big shout out to the the AFVentures team, especially during COVID-19, AFWERX and AFVentures became the small business entry point for the entire Pentagon. This was an amazing partnership we developed with Ellen Lord and her joint acquisition task force, because they realized that we had this amazing resource in the Air Force, and we opened our Air Force and Space Force door for everyone, and got to do some amazing work with the Department of Health and Human Services and FEMA, and got to bring in amazing companies who could build ventilators and personal protective gear. And all of this was part of a broader enterprise we had because we're the executive agent, the Air Force is, for the Defense Production Act. So these small businesses were helping alongside the big businesses like the 3Ms that we were putting on contract to increase N95 mass production and vaccine capabilities within the US. So it's awesome that in our response to COVID-19 in the Pentagon, that small businesses and AFVentures in general played this important role, not just for the Air Force, but for the entire department. So real congratulations if any of you have been a part of that. What was the second? I'm sorry, I got so excited about the COVID-19.
Well,
what's the second part of your
software.
Yeah. So I could
go
go
on. ATOs.
ATOs and software. Yeah, I was like COVID-19. I know there was something else in this question, but yeah, if you were part of this, hats off. So Jason Ratchey, Chris Benson, Austin DeLorme, who is unfortunately retiring out of the military, but these heroes have just done an amazing job. And we're really grateful that the Ellen Lord and her team, Stacy Cummings, put their trust in us to be able to run that front door during this time of need. Hey, software, hugely important to this service, the Air Force and the Space Force as well. We want to be the digitally dominating force on the battlefield. And so we are leading the charge, bringing technologies like containerization and Kubernetes, zero trust in general, into our military in a way that's not a side gig, but how we operate. So I mentioned things like Cloud One and Platform One with ABMS. Well, ground-based strategic deterrent, like this huge must-succeed program, is also using Cloud One and Platform One. We are partnered with the defense company that's working currently on our tech maturation and research phase, so Northrop Grumman, working together on fully containerized software development. So what does that mean for you as a software company? As we move into owning our tech stack in a way that we can share with you, with industry. So this is crazy, right? The government sharing its tech stack. We suck at IT, right? Well, we're getting better. We're getting good. Not just good for government, but good. We've got more to grow. But imagine if we can allow you to have your own license to our virtual private cloud with all of our government accreditations already in the stack, including the authority to operate. So if you develop within the rules and guidelines of the stack, security is baked in, cybersecurity, even testing is what we aspire to. I think it's going to open up a huge door for us to go lightning fast to bring software in. And I'll tell you, one reason we've got to do this, bring in containerization so that we can run code the same way regardless of platform. So our development environment's the same as our production, the same as our operational environment. Code runs the same anywhere. That helps us get to operating much faster. So if you're a company and you want that steady revenue that comes from being in operations with us, we can get from development to operations much faster. But a reason this government-owned tech stack with automation baked into it's going to be important is for software capabilities beyond just normal code. So if we want to get AI out to the operational edge, our system right now doesn't do that very well. And so we're going to have to bake a level of automation into the stack to ensure safety of flight, safety of operation. That's going to enable us to do AI as fast as you can develop it. And right now our system would crumple trying to certify something that changes all the time. And that really, to be frank, you can't audit like you can code that's done in closed form. with all the connected data that helps ultimately sum up to an algorithm making a decision based on the output of some kind of trace over a convolutional neural net. It's hard to ask it why. The answer is the trace it took. It's just what the math said to do. And our system needs to be able to get into deeper reasons of why actions were taken and how we can assure that they're safe and they comport with mission. So bottom line, Vidaf, if the software speak and all these technologies, if you're thinking, I've never heard anything about this, just understand that in order for us to move at digital speeds, we have got to get really good at software in the Air Force, and we are. So thank you, software factories. Thank you, Kessel Run. Thank you, Platform One, Cloud One, all of those teams, Kobayashi Maru, that are helping drive it. We've got to get really good at that, but all of that can't just be in writing code. We've got to bake it into our tech stack, our cloud, our platform. So if you're a software company and right now you can ride on Amazon services or Google services, you can ride on Air Force and Space Force services and immediately connect with our mission in a way that's seamless and where risk is reduced. So the tough part about this, Vito, everything's hard. We got to get good at everything. But to compete, yeah, you do. If you're not willing to compete everywhere, you can be beat anywhere.
How is it with AFVentures? How do we know if we're doing well? What metrics do you kind of see as important as we're moving forward to continue this process improvement?
Three things. We need to see a measurable return on investment for our military missions, but we can take a long time horizon for that. Tech takes time, and this is investment. Now, when I say investment, we're not owning equity in these companies, but we know that not every company is going to succeed, and that's okay. We need to take on daring things. So our investment portfolio needs to have a return, but we do not need to create a very short-term horizon for that ROI. So that's thing one. Thing two, we need to have a catalyzing effect on the U.S. ecosystem. This is more of a strategic objective. So not just looking for our return, we're looking at the way we're engaging. Are we making our tech ecosystem better by the way we engage? Maybe that's something like Agility Prime, where we're trying to accelerate a market. Or maybe we're playing a more complementary role in deep tech that can help the ecosystem. But we need to make sure that we're playing a role that is catalyzing and synergistic. That's thing two. And thing three, and this is potentially the most important, because if we get this wrong, we'll never get to the first two. And that is a positive user experience for all involved, whether you are a company, an investor, a program team, an AFVentures or AFWERX member, or a user on the battlefield. Everyone needs to have a positive experience so that we're willing to put in the hard work that investment takes.
So we're getting close to our time here. One last question. So it's the 1st of September, 2025. So fast forward 5 years. It's the 1st of September, 2025. What does it look like? What does AFVentures look like? What do you see as the successes of AFVentures? Where's the direction that you've seen AFVentures go over the course of those 5 years?
Well, the great thing about making predictions, you can be sure to be wrong. So I'm sure that a future me is going to be looking back at this video thinking, well, didn't get much of that right. But you asked for prediction, and I'll do my best to give you one. The first thing is that for AFVentures to succeed as our investment arm for the Air and Space Force, AFWERX has to succeed. That's critical. That is why we've picked an exceptional leader like yourself. That is why we've got exceptional rock stars on the team. We've got to ensure that top talent continue to hit this team. And we're very fortunate that the person in charge of our talent in the acquisition enterprise is General Bunch, who every day has to ensure that we are trained, manned and equipped to compete long term. And that now includes the investment side of the Air Force and Space Force as well. So we've got to make sure we get the right people into AFWERX. so that AFWERX across all of its branches succeeds. Now, for AFVentures specifically, here are some things I hope will happen in 5 years. I hope that we will have created a small number of defense unicorns that will have gotten their chance to grow to meteoric heights because of defense funds. That's going to be one litmus test for me, because our missions ought to help that level of growth. Our early product market fits ought to help accelerate growth. So I'm going to be looking for that in 5 years. I'm going to be looking for the first real returns on investment outside of the software portfolio. So software companies can create a quick return on investment. We're very happy about that. But right now, about half of private investment, half of venture capital, is going into fairly quick return on investment in software. And about 80% of private investment on the whole is going into some software or digitally enabled tech, either short-term or long-term. So if all we're doing is software, we're not actually playing our strategic role. So I want to see the first of the hardware, the deeper tech, start coming in. And then I think what's really important is that we ensure that the experiences that we have graduating classes from AFVentures, who that's part of their narrative as a company, that keeps them coming back with new ideas, or that makes them feel like their corporate identity has a portion that focuses on defense, and that very much is their identity, that it aligns with their value as a company. And so if user experience is not something that's through the roof, and I predict it will be, then I know the thing will implode. So I want to see some unicorns. I want to see the returns coming back outside of software. I would like to see the amount of money that we're bringing in grow into the many billions. We brought in over 1.1 billion last year in private investment. And I don't know how big we can go, but I think 3 to 4, maybe even 5 billion is not out of the sight line. And then a positive user experience. And outside of AFVentures, I hope that we have a small handful of prime programs as well.
Dr. Just final few minutes, closing thoughts to leave with the audience that's been gracious enough to join us here this afternoon.
Well, I just, Vidoff, want to thank you for all of the AFWERX team that's facilitating this meeting and that does an exceptional job of all of these virtual events. Just want to thank all of these heroes that are in the digital wings of the theater here. The backstage crew does an exceptional job. And what I love about AFWERX, they don't just bring in a wonderful zeal for innovation. They really do a great job of engagement as well. So well done running this today. For everyone joining, I'll leave you with this. So I'm always optimistic and energetic when it comes to technology. But let me just end with a sobering thought, and then I'll end with a happy thought. You know, we have a steep competition ahead. And if you hear that and you think, yeah, we're going to hit the competition talking point, what I'd ask you to do is, even though you're having a senior government person talk to you, just hit the pause button and step out of the narrative just for a second. We're accustomed to everything being okay in recent history. We've got the world's best military, the world's dominant economy, amazing tech ecosystem, and we've had a good run in recent times, but there is no telling what the future is going to bring. The COVID-19 has shaken up things, made the future look less certain. And in a nation like China, that, hey, I hope things end up okay. I hope we find a new kind of great power partnership, but it doesn't appear that things are going that way. And I think I've seen the change just in the time I've been here and how China's viewed just with the engagement on Hong Kong alone. I think that's brought an awareness that was lacking in a lot of sectors in the country. And now working with China is viewed differently than I saw it 3 years ago. And so that's where I'm going to come back to as a happy thought. But let me go back on that competitor thread. China has a lot of advantages. They're going to probably double our GDP by 2030. They'll likely quadruple population and have between 10 to 15 times the STEM graduates that we'll have. And so they bring an amazing scale that's formidable. And we can't compete on scale. And so, like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, there's some wisdom in that. We're going to have to be the mouth puncher. We're going to have to be the disruptor, because if we're not disrupting our competitors' plan, then we give them too much time to bring the scale to bear that is their advantage. This is the hand that is left to us. Now, here's the happy thought. Even though we're not going to have the scale, very likely, we have demonstrated an amazing propensity to innovate. That is just a hallmark of this nation. Markets appear to keep the juices flowing for continual creativity. And I know that continual creativity is something we're going to have to treat as a strategic resource in this nation if we are going to be the disruptor. And it's the only plan, it's the only strategy that I see is feasible. And so I view that as a strength that now we have to treat as almost like we have custody care of it within the military, as a catalyst, as an incubator, and as a stimulator, bringing the resources that the nation gives us to continue to stimulate innovation, not just for our mission, but anywhere that we foresee an advantage, even in the far future. Agility Prime speaks to that. And if we do that, if we bring our military market, that I would say is right now not strongly coupled to the commercial tech ecosystem in any way that has an impact, and we can bring our market to bear in a way that couples synergistically with the commercial market, then I think we would get the benefit of a whole of nation approach to winning on the innovation battlefield, but without having to nationalize our approach as to which technologies or companies will win it in which timeframes. The benefit of the markets while still having the benefit of a national approach. And so we've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to make this dual market, military and commercial partnership work. And that's something new. That is new in this century. And so I think we've cracked some of the code with AFVentures, but we don't own the copyright or trademarks on innovation. We certainly don't own the copyrights on venture and investment. We have learned from some of the best at private firms across the nation. We want to hear from you continually. I want to hear from you. Where can we improve? What are we not doing as well as we could? What are the next steps and next levels? And if we continue to hit those, then I think that the rest of the government will likely follow the example, and we will become more and more a government that thinks about the partnership role that we play, not just the governing role that we play. And stakes couldn't be higher, so let's start today.
Dr. Orwell, thanks so much. Thanks to the entire group that's been supporting us here to make this happen today, and all the folks in the audience. Looking forward to continuing that partnership.
Thanks, Vida. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Be safe, and thank you for your interest in AFWERX and one of its critical branches, AFVentures, the investment arm of the Air and Space Force.